The Progressive Era was a period in the United States that ran from the 1890s to the 1920s in which there was widespread social and political activism. It was a time of calls for prohibition, women's suffrage, antitrust laws, and movements against corruption in politics. It was in this era that the term muckraker became a popular way to refer to journalists and activists who investigated and wrote about social wrongs. Their name was given to them by President Theodore Roosevelt, who somewhat disparaged the muckrakers in a speech delivered in 1906. Did the work of the muckrakers make a difference? How would we know? Economists, political scientists, and historians have studied the effects of media, sometimes with a view to understanding the role of investigative journalism. We will be hearing now from Professor Luigi Zingales from the University of Chicago's Booth School of Business about his research. Zingales and Professors Alexander Dyke and David Moss tried to understand the policy impact of the original muckrakers. They studied congressional voting patterns during the Progressive Era. They found that muckraking had a statistically significant effect on the voting patterns of U.S. senators and House representatives. Elected U.S. officials changed government policies because of articles written by the muckrakers. The research by the three professors provides compelling statistical evidence of the impact of muckraking. Professor Luigi Zingales joins us now to tell us more about his work.
Many historians have claimed that the muckraking was instrumental to the Progressive Era legislation. What we do in this study is trying to document it behind reasonable doubt, at least to the extent you can do that in economics. And so what we show is that there is a remarkable correlation between the way senators and House members vote on certain issues and the fact that those issues were dealt in particular muckraking newspapers and the circulation of those newspapers in those districts. So we are really trying to trace the effect that muckraking had on a particular district and the impact that this awareness has on the people who vote for certain issues. Muckrakers were very successful for a number of reasons. First of all, there was a pre-existing, very widespread distribution of readership. Many of the key muckraking journals were not muckraking to begin with, were literary journals that had wide diffusion, and then some people, among which Upton Sinclair, saw the opportunity of using this readership to actually push some new ideas or new facts. And so I think that the key element was that there was this vast readership that you can access through this channel, and that the owners of these newspapers saw it profitable to do that. The series, the Upton Sinclair or the one about the Rockefeller, were very important and sold very well. So I think that there was a combination of social motives and business motives that were going in the same direction. And at the time, the amount of advertising was fairly limited. And so there wasn't this negative impact of if I sort of touch business interests, the advertising goes down or something like this. And that made it easier for the muckraking journals to do their job. There was a novelty factor, which is very important. We know, and Amartya Sen said, that in a country with free newspaper, you will never have a famine, because the famine is big news, and so the politician will intervene once the newspaper pick it up. But you can deal with structural hunger because people get used to it. I'm sorry to say, but structural hunger is no news, and a famine is news. So the muckraking brought a new genre. There was the innovation factor that was caught us by surprise. The corporate world was not prepared for that. I actually studied in a separate paper what happened in Russia shortly after the fall of the Berlin Wall, when the oligarchs were trying to sort of take control of corporations, etc. And there was room to some mostly foreign correspondents exposing some of these oligarchs. Why? Because they weren't prepared for that. They were used to newspapers where you just write a check and they shut up, and faced with the Financial Times or the Wall Street Journal, faced with sort of Western press, they didn't know how to deal with it. But since then they've caught up, and so now it's much more difficult. So I think the surprise factor is very important. And of course, sort of the advertising base is probably also an important cause, even if we can't pin it down, but I think it does play a role. The old way of doing investigative journalism, I think, is dead, because it used to be heavily subsidized by the profitability of the rest of the newspapers, and today they're not profitable anymore, so they can't afford to do that. I thought that the model of the past was what I call the haute couture model. It's like Valentino designs phenomenal dresses that no human being can actually buy, and have like this huge show, but it does that in order to sell the more ordinary sort of suits and dresses. In the same way, newspapers were paying for this lavish investigative journalists to create a reputation and that make money in other ways. I think that this model is dead, and we're struggling to find new models. I think that investigative journalism is a crucial element not only for democracy, but also for efficient working of capitalism. And I think without it, we are all poor.